Where are you from?
Yeah, man, I grew up in northern Michigan, in a pretty small little town. And yeah, it was, we had a pretty fun little childhood.
So
Got a little,
rural
yeah,
area.
yeah, pretty rural. Not, a couple hours from any big city in Michigan, so pretty far up north there. Grew up hunting and fishing with my dad, and I got a little brother who's only 14 months younger than me. So we were, super close growing up, and yeah, it was a lot of outdoorsy stuff. And both my parents are big skiers, and so we were big into the snow sports when we were little. So it was always like, strapping snowboard bindings to skateboards and jumping on the trampolines in the summer and skateboarding. And, we lived right on our town we grew up on, was right on Lake Michigan. So, it was right on the lake. All sorts of like fun, cool stuff to do for a couple months out of the year. And then it would get super cold and we'd ski and snowboard and play hockey. And yeah, man, it was a lot of fun growing up there for sure.
Very, very cool. What did your parents do?
My dad has always kind of done his own thing, kind of entrepreneur-wise. He was in the energy industry for a long time. Kind of now just kind of does a handful of different stuff. So, yeah, it was cool to be around that kind of independent spirit growing up. Yeah. And kind of see how that played out for them, and the ups and downs and kind of everywhere in between. So
the life of an entrepreneur. What were you hunting all big game, small game, or was it sort of just one type of thing? What were you doing when you were coming up?
Yeah, it was a lot of fishing. My dad's a real big fly fisherman, and then a lot of bird hunting, a lot of upland bird hunting, pheasant and chukar and grouse and stuff like that. So nice. He had some pretty phenomenal bird hunting areas right outside of where I grew up. So yeah, a lot of that, and yeah, a lot of like skateboarding and snowboarding and skiing, and we were super lucky. It was ski areas and stuff in Michigan are super small, so most of them are all lit up. And my mom would drop us off after school, and we'd be snowboarding under lights on like little 200-foot vertical hills until like 9-10 o'clock, and she'd pick the group of us up like shredding down to the parking lot. We'd all pile in and drop the homies off, and like that was like our daily routine when we were in elementary school. So
that's very cool, man.
Very cool. It was different. It was like super small hills.
Let me ask, when did you become aware of the plant? Was that earlier on in life, or did that not come till later?
Yeah, it's, kind of all tied into that. Like we'd be in the winters, we'd be at the little ski areas, like unsupervised as, third, fourth, fifth, sixth graders or whatever. And, like the high school kids would be, smoking doobies and whatever, and like egging us on to like hit the jumps that like were probably too big for us so they could watch us eat shit. Like, so it's like, I remember that scene kind of being like where I first kind of like smelled it, saw it, like, oh, like there's a group of dudes over here like sparking something up. Like, what are they doing? Like as a innocent little elementary school kid. So that, and then again, kind of tying all that together. We kind of, that was like really what we were into for a while, was like the winter snow sports scene. My brother's a really, really phenomenal snowboarder. Rode on a couple pro teams for a while and stuff. So when we were in like 6th and 7th grade, we kind of had started figuring out like, oh, like there's like a freestyle side of this, and like we were getting big enough to actually like hit jumps and stuff like that, and it was like really what we were into. My parents like grew up in a like racing background, and they owned a ski shop for a long time, so like they were like, we don't know anything about this, and we were like, hell yeah, like we're crazy little boys, like I said, jumping off my mom's porch onto the trampoline when my dad was gone, and he'd come back and be like, what the hell is going on? And she'd be like, yeah, no, they're just like having fun, So it was like kind of quickly escalating beyond like them being able to help us learn how to do that. So this is, you know, like early 2000s, late 90s. And so by the time I was in like 7th grade, it was kind of the era when all these places out west in the summertime had these like ski and snowboard camps. Like you could go to like Windell's at Mount Hood, or you could go to like Camp of Champions up in Whistler in the summertime. And like all the big pros would be the coaches and shit like that. And it was like, you know, the nicest built terrain parks at the time. And like, it just looked like, you know, kind of like heaven on earth for some, you know, little kid who was into that at the time. So I remember we like begged and like tried to talk my parents into it for a while, and they like said no, and then it's finally like, all right, well, you want to do it, you're gonna have to help like pay your way to get out there. So first time I went out there, I was in 7th grade, man. So like I remember doing any chore I could to like save whatever buck I fucking could to like be able to go out to Whistler in the summer. And like I still can't believe they let us go out there. So like first time I went out there, I was 13. I was in summer after 7th grade. And you basically get like plugged in with a roommate. You get assigned a group to ski with. And then you're kind of like on your own in Whistler Village for like 2 weeks as a, you know, young kid. So that was like kind of the summer routine when we were like, you know, young teenagers. And we'd go up there and like ski on the glacier and on these super cool terrain parks for a couple of weeks and like learn how to do stuff and like have all that culture around it there as like that very progressive scene at the time. Like it was super, super cool. So then I did that like for like 4 or 5 years in the summertime, just because it was so much fun what we were into. And so it was summer after 9th grade. I'm going back out there, you know, had done it a couple of years at this point. I got a homie with me. My little brother's there. He's got a buddy with him and whatever. And we're on the airplane out there. And one of the older dudes from the kind of Michigan ski scene sees me on the plane. And he's like, oh, yo, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, we're like going out to skiing. It was like on a flight to Vancouver. So he's like, you guys going to Whistler? We're like, yeah. He's like, I'm working at one of the camps. He was working at the camp as like a digger at the terrain park when we were going up there. So it was kind of like that summer we got off the plane and like got on the bus, went up to Whistler from Vancouver with everybody. And it was like not the normal like check in at camp and get your room. It was like, you're coming with us. So we like go to their little apartment condo thing they had in Whistler Village, where all like the staff at the camp would like.
You just broke up.
1920 at the time. We were a bunch of kids running 26 quick flash. So yeah, we get like yanked off the bus, me and my homie, by some dudes we know that are working at the camp in Whistler, and go to their condo. And you know, it's like a college like condo. They've got like beer cans everywhere. There's like, you know, bongs on the table and shit. And we had kind of like, you know, had an idea of what it was at this point. And they're like, we're getting fucking baked and going walking around the village. I was like, they're like, you're coming with us. I was like, all right, cool. So like, remember they had this like crazy little bubbler thing. It's actually like kind of similar to like this old style one, you know. And like, you know, didn't even know what like the carb hole was on the side. You know, I remember them being all like psyched to get us baked for the first time. Like, you know, cough my ass off. We go like run around Whistler Village and like fuck around, and they're all like laughing their ass off. They're kind of like, you're not really high, are you? I'm like, no, not. So like they're like, we're going back to the condo, and like whatever, I did the thing again. They like made sure I like did it right that time and just got fucking ripped. And it was like, oh, okay, this is fucking amazing. And it's kind of like we like were smoking the whole like couple weeks we were out there and whatever, and got really spoiled. It was like good weed, you know. It was like Whistler in like early 2000s. Like it was like good. It was good weed. I remember they had a dude come up in like a lifted Subaru and had like all these like sacks and like a fishing tackle box. And they like picked some shit out when we got over there, and like then we'd go back over there and have them hit homie up. He'd like come back over and they'd be like, "What do you want?" And I remember like first time we ever smoked, it was like Orange Crush, I think. It was the like strain they were all like hyped about up there at the time or whatever. It was like, pretty funny. So then like after that, it was like it's kind of when all the homies started smoking that summer, you know, and then it was kind of like into high school, it was like an everyday thing. And I had some like older buddies, and it was kind of always like, where do we find that stuff that we smoked out in British Columbia? Because all we can find is this shit that's like brown and compressed and like tastes like ass and full of seeds. You know, so it was like a big change when we got back home after like getting spoiled in Whistler for a couple weeks. And it was like, you go, okay, now I gotta like call the older homies I know and like try and find some weed, you know. And it wasn't that hard. Like I had some family friends with like, you know, older kids I grew up with who were like seniors at the time or whatever when I was like a little freshman or whatever. So you know, and a sophomore. We had, so where I grew up, it was like junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And then high school was 10th, 11th, 12th.
That's so that's the Canadian model.
Hell yeah. We're pretty much Canadian. Like we touch Canada on like 3 sides. So
Canada has everybody in the US. It's weird when I remember growing up the traveling back and forth and it being so different. I'm like, why are they anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so it was like, you know, 10th grade was when we were really in like the high school building, and I had a bunch of like kids that I had grown up with that were like seniors at the time, and it was like, oh, okay, well, kind of quickly started learning how things work, and like, you know, and then it was quickly like, oh, like all my friends want some of this. It was like, oh, okay. And then it just kind of like started escalating from there, you know. It was always kind of like, how do we find good weed? It was like,
where were those packs? Where were those packs coming from?
Dude, I have no idea. Like the early shit we were smoking that we were just like get from the homies, like it was straight brick. And I ended up, I kind of found out where that shit came from a couple of years down the road that we'll like tap into, but we didn't really know. You know, we were just like 15-year-old kids, like trying to like hide bags of weed in our pocket when we couldn't even drive yet. And it was like, then everyone got driver's licenses, and it was like, okay, this kind of like opens up a new world. So it's like my parents were super cool. They like never really like endorsed it, but you know, they like let us drink a beer every now and then when we were like pretty young, like kind of Euro style, like, you know, you don't want your first time being like, you know, drinking from the fire hose kind of shit. So they never like, you know, their whole like rules were like, get decent grades, don't get in trouble with the law, and we don't really give a fuck. You know, like if you get those 2 boxes, like we're gonna give you all the rope you want to hit yourself with. Just don't fucking tie the noose, you know? Yeah. So yeah, we grew up with like a lot of freedom as like high schoolers to kind of like go fuck around and find out.
No, absolutely.
Like better. So like, yeah, it was kind of like, you know, just started doing I mean, this is a long time ago, so I'm pretty comfortable talking about it now. But you know, it's like, yeah, just started kind of doing the hustling thing, and then it was like all the homies that were seniors when I was young were kind of like graduated and off at school by the time we were seniors. And then it was kind of like, oh, they're down in the big cities down south, like, you know, Grand Rapids, Detroit, Lansing, you know, kind of the bigger areas in Michigan. And it was like, okay, like, yeah, come down. And it was like, oh, this is different now. Okay, like there's there's a different vibe to this. And a lot of it was like, Hugh, come down, let me hook you up with this dude I met, you know, and they're like freshmen, sophomores in college getting played like on a big fucking campus scenario and shit like that, you know. So like, yeah, we kind of got thrown into the wolves real fast and figured out like what to do, what not to do, like how to conduct yourself, and like, you know, found ourselves in some situations we definitely shouldn't have like been in at that age by any means by the time we were seniors. And like, you know, it's like, you know, put the collared shirts back on and drive back up north and have fun for a few weeks kind of deal. So
That's
that
awesome.
was our high school, man. It was like, yeah, Northern Michigan, and dude, you could drive 20 minutes in any direction and you'd be out in the fucking woods, you know. Like we'd have big parties in the middle of public land with like massive fucking bonfires, like, and it was a small town, but it was a big school. Like we had like 400 kids in our class. There was like, you know, 1,500 kids in the school. Wow. So like, and we kind of became the weed kids at school. You know, so it was like there was a couple years there, like junior and senior year, where we like did some really like dumb shit that we probably shouldn't have done, and learned some really like valuable life lessons that, you know, looking back, it's like I'm glad I learned them, but probably could have learned them in a different way, you know. So,
less detrimental. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, luckily, you know, never gotten major trouble, you know, never got myself in, you know, a super like horrible situation. Like definitely, you know, got jacked a couple times, you know, shit like that back in the day as a dumb young little kid running around in places I shouldn't have been. But, you know, got super lucky, never got in like major trouble. And then, yeah, it was kind of like, all right, I'm moving out west. I know, you know, that's where good herb is. I know that's where you can like ski, hunt, fish all in one fucking place. It's just like the grass is greener. It's kind of over the Midwest at that time. Like it's just a different, it's a different vibe, you know? So I was like, yeah, I'm moving out west, and I had a couple of skier buddies that had kind of like lived in different areas, and one of them was out here in Bellingham, where we're back at now, and actually ended up passing away right before I came to visit him out here. He had a big heart condition. But I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like I'm going out to Bellingham. I had a buddy with me that like was like, I'm not doing shit. Like, yeah, I'll move out there with you. So like we loaded up my car and drove out here, and had ended up having a friend from back home that we found out was living out here at the time. So like we're able to like quickly make some connections out here, you know, quickly kind of got plugged into a group of friends out here in Bellingham. And it was kind of another like eye-opening time. Like, okay, like, yeah, like we used to be going down to like the sketchy, you know, neighborhood supermarket to like pick out what we wanted. And a lot of it wasn't like pick out what you wanted. It was like, here's what's available. And then it's like, you kind of get out here and it was like, you know, Costco. It's like, everybody's got something. Everybody's growing something. There's like shit everywhere, you know, much more like competitive kind of scene, I guess, at a bigger scale. So yeah, it was super cool. And it was like, oh, there's good weed everywhere. And yeah, met a bunch of people that are, you know, still really good friends of mine to this day. Some of them still are. It's a super special little area, man. It's always kind of been pretty big on the scene in its own little way. Up here, you know, from Seattle to Bellingham, we're like up in the northwest corner. So we're you know, it's a border-based port town. You know, there's a lot more than cannabis going on out here. So they've always had like, you know, it's always been, by the time I got out here, it was like already pretty mild, like, but on like the personal possession and use side. But there was a time like, you know, we kind of started doing the same thing out here and just like met different people. And it was like, okay, like we were up on the college campus and had buddies that were off campus. And it was like, okay, this is pretty easy to connect those dots. So, you know, and then it was like, there was kind of a wild time out here from like, I don't know, really hard to say when it really started, but like before 2010, before all like the medical stuff was really like the big transition out here where people were just getting raided like crazy. People were getting busted like crazy. So, you know, it's like every house up and down the street had a little like closet grow on it and shit, or like a little room or something going on, including like us and the homies, and, you know, had some like friends get caught, their houses like get busted, and it was like, you know, had a really close call with some really close friends, and, you know, a house I was supposed to get into. It's kind of like, all right, maybe it's time to like chill for a little bit, you know. So happened to be the same time I like tore my knee up skiing out here, and, you know, had surgery, so I was like all on crutches and shit. And then it's like, all right, let's like, you know, change pace a little bit. And the time I was like going to school out here, and was like kind of realized that wasn't like for me. You know, in high school was kind of the same way. I was just like, I don't really see how this isn't really like super beneficial to me. Like I get the curriculum pretty easily, but I know there's a lot more that I need to learn besides just this shit. So I was just like, I didn't like going to school. So came down to like, I had to go to like the last 2 months of my senior year. They were gonna not let me graduate. So I had to like buckle down and like get to it. But, you know, that kind of just continued out here. I wasn't really like ready to like be in college or like be in that kind of like a learning environment. I was more just like trying to figure shit out on my own. So, you know, ended up not getting asked to come back to school one semester. And I was like, all right, I gotta kind of like get my shit together here. And a bunch of people were getting in trouble at the same time. It was like, all right, let's like change pace. So, you know, my girlfriend and I, who's now my wife at the time, we picked up and kind of moved to Colorado, where I had some family and a lot of friends, and finished school there at like a small little state college, and, you know, had to kind of like start over, and met a bunch of other like cool people. It was like, you know, same kind of mission. Like, all right, where's the good weed? Like, who's got the good stuff here? It was like, you know, in the skiing community, it's like really easy to find. And I had some cousins that lived out there in town, and like my aunt owned a ski shop. My aunt and uncle owned a ski shop there in Western Colorado. So it was like, you know, kind of got plugged into the, you know, like the ski scene pretty quick. And those two things kind of go hand in hand. So yeah, it was super fun, and like spent some time in Colorado, and ended up finishing school there. And yeah, so
what was that like? Like what was the biggest difference that you immediately observed in the culture between Bellingham and Colorado, being both very weed focused towns?
Yeah, I was gonna say they're like pretty similar, you know. Where we ended up in Colorado was Gunnison, Crested Butte area. And I mean, like the town's like, you know, 5,000 people. Like it's pretty dang small. So it's a pretty tight knit little community. You know, I had some family there. But yeah, a lot of little, like a lot of guys growing. This was when like the medical scene there was kind of really starting to kick off. We moved there in 2010. And we're in the Gunnison area for a few years. So it was the same kind of scene, like just at a much smaller scale, because the little valley was smaller. So like a lot of little, like, you know, a lot of dudes growing really good weed, you know, and we had like gotten into the concentrate thing, kind of like circling back to Bellingham before this. So this is kind of like the next stage, but that's a funny one we should touch on too. Like, I remember being in Bellingham and our roommate running in with like a copper tube with this is like maybe 2008, you know, Comes running in. He's like, hey, I gotta check this shit out. He caught a copper tube with coffee filter and a metal screen around that too, hose clamp on it. And then like, a fitting on the other end you had drilled a little hole into so your, butane can get in there. He's like, you guys got to see this shit. He's like, this shit's fucking crazy. And like we would be able to get traditional like old school hash at the time too, right? Like I had some buddies that would bring it up from Cali and shit like that. And we'd get like big chunks of old school hash. And like we'd take knife rips at the time, like the original dab, the old school days, like heating metal butter knives up. And then, like that kind of Bellingham was like always been big on the glass scene out here. Like there's a handful of some of the biggest glass makers are still out here, still crushing it now, like 15, 20 years later, Mothership guys, a bunch, Jake C, a bunch of people are still out in the area. So then it came to the point where like dudes had glass paddles, like the glass blowers here were like taking just rods and like squishing them flat. So it was like 2 discs. And then it was kind of like take knifers on like glass knives. If you were like, heady boy back then, it was like, sick.
Were you involved in that scene back then? Like, did you participate and were you actively sort of fascinated by that when you moved to Bellingham? Back in
by the glass or by the concentrates?
By the glass.
Yeah, kind of. It was just like, yeah, we had like our little like shelf with like all of our like non-heady rigs on them. Like, we were going to school out there, but like, yeah, you remember that. It's like that was kind of like when Mothership was like starting to become a thing, and like there was a nice gallery in town that had like some crazy rigs on display, like in a glass case. It was like being put out as like art, not just as like a smoking utensil. Like,
yeah,
where I grew up, it was like, there was one head shop in town. You had to like, there was like always that one dude who was like the 18-year-old at the high schooler before everyone else that you had to like, he'd like charge double to go get you like some shitty little spoon or whatever. So like you couldn't even like go in there, let alone like, it was kind of like these are for smoking tobacco, like shit like that. So like out there it was like way different. Like you could go into like a music store and they'd have like just a rack of fucking pipes in the back and be like, oh yeah, check this bong out, bro. And like it was just like a different scene. So yeah, it was like, it was super cool. We didn't really have like, like heady glass at the time, but it was around, it was like starting to become a thing. This is an old Bellingham piece that I got probably around that like 2009 time frame.
That is very
and it's
cool.
like, it was like, it's definitely got some like blemishes on the bottom with the like where it like comes together and shit, but I've been trying to figure out who made it for the last little bit, and like no one can help me figure it out. But so that was like a kind of like a heady pipe at the time, So it was like starting to become a thing, but like wasn't really like into it. You know what I mean? So
were you doing
like
a lot of
big bongs was the thing,
For sure. Were you doing a lot of open blasting after your friend came and showed you that copper tubing?
That's yeah. So like, yeah, getting back to that, he comes, this is before Colorado, kind of going back again, bouncing back. He comes running in with this copper pipe, and he must have had it packed with like fresh trim, because he comes with the, Pyrex dish, and he's like, check this shit out. And we're like, dude, we're in the bathroom with the fucking bathroom vent on. Like, like not even out back. He's just like, check this shit out. And he's got like hot water in the bathtub, already down, so he can just spray right into the thing and it immediately starts bubbling off. It's probably the worst fucking way to do that shit. And it comes out like emerald green, like this jade green syrup starts coming out. And we're like, the hell is it? He's like, no, just wait, and it like all bubbles off, and then he like, scrapes it up with a razor blade and like gets it onto a piece of parchment, and it was like, At that point, it wasn't even like really knifers of that stuff. It was like put a little bit on a bowl and like melt it in there and smoke it. And then that, yeah, I mean, kind of started messing around with the lasting for a little while. Just cut out there. And but we always get hash from guys different hash than they give us. And the thing at the time back then was like they'd have these big hollow slides, you know, like a single layer glass slide bowl piece. And they'd layer this shit, weed hash, you know, until the whole like, you know, 1.5 inch bowl piece was full. And then they'd take, you know, the tech at the time, like whether you were smoking flower or what, was the heat guns. You know, you take like a DeWalt heat gun and, you know, vape your bong load or whatever. But they'd take that thing and they'd melt the hash down into the bowl, like into the layers of weed. But I remember you could like, the way they spread that shit on and the way you could watch it bubble when they were hitting it with the heat gun to like make it all one mass in the bowl, it would like, you know, be like ooey gooey bubbling, like you were like, damn, what's that? You'd be like, let me get some of that shit. They'd be like, nah, dude, we don't sell that. You know, like that was like their head stash. And it was probably like, you know, kind of like early day like melt, you know, like that they would just like temple ball out. And it was like probably like, you know, first pull of like the good heads that they were pulling out. And that shit was so good. And it was like, God, I still remember some of that shit. I don't even know what strain it was. It was probably just a mix of a bunch of different shit and whatever. But some of that shit they had, like fire.
These were the guys coming up from California that you were.
They were Cali boys, yeah, and like that was kind of a different thing because it's always been so close to Canada up here that like, you know, that's who we get like our head stash shit from, you know. Like dudes that were from Bellingham that were like down in Humboldt and shit down there, and they'd like bring stuff back up like for the homies and whatnot. So, but we'd get hash from them, and it was like pretty good. And then they'd have like, you know, they clearly had been like skimming the cream for themselves. And every now and then you get to, and then it's like, how do we get that? They're like, no, we don't sell it. And it's finally like, all right, well, like, tell me how to make it. Because like every house on the street has a small grow room in it, you know. So they were like, all right. And we did a little bonsai trip down there for like 36 hours and watched them make a batch and like totally skipped the whole like drying portion of it, and like came back and like did the whole paint mixer, wooden spoon combo kind of thing. And like, we actually, you know, they're like, yeah, you can go back up and you guys got to go up to Vancouver and you can get these things called bubble bags at this store up there. Like you don't have to worry about ordering them. It's like, I mean, Amazon's not a thing at this point in time. So they're like, all right, well, sweet. Let's go up to Vancouver. We can like drink beer. There's hostels. There's like shops you can like smoke in up there. Like, I'll like make a night out of it, whatever. So we go up there and like we had done that a couple of times, and it was like its own different scene up there, you know. So end up like going down and doing the whole like East Hastings, like tap on the window weed joint down there to like get ushered in and like get stuff to smoke. So we just come across the border. And then you go to like New Amsterdam Cafe and like chill for a while. And they had that like, there was like that store, like a door down or two. And that's where it's kind of funny being on Bubble Man's channel right now, is like where he was originally selling these bags, dude. So we like go in there and like, you know, buy a 5-gallon set of bubble bags. And I can't remember if Marcus was actually in the store that day, but Mark Emery was in the store that day, you know, like back when he was like on the scene and like kind of like whatever, trying to do his thing up there. And like he had like some like interview thing going on. And they're like, what are you buying these things for? I was like, you know what they are? Like, I'm trying to make some hash, man. I'm like, okay. And we like bounced out of there and then like, went back down and started like trying to figure out how to like make our own hash. Cause like everyone was making BHO at the time. Like that shit was kind of popping off. And it was like, there were people kind of starting to do different like post-processing stuff at like a very, very basic level with their BHO at the time. Like you could spray it out on a big, long, like a 5-foot long mirror. And it like that faster, and then you could like keep it cold and scrape it off and keep it like sharp, or like you get into a gooey ball and like whatever. So, we were trying to, I was like, I want to learn how to make that shit that these guys have that I really like, because it wouldn't light on fire when you put a flame to it. And it always tasted really, really good and just got you like kind of like slap happy high on another level. So it was like, all right. Then we started like washing stuff, and it just did not go well, like at all. Like it was like, parchment and pizza boxes on the heater trying to dry stuff, like barely being able to get it through a sieve, or like if you even could, just no cold room, trying to like chop it up as fine as you can as it would dry, like probably just moldy and gross. But dude, we smoked it. We tried to make it, and then it was like, all right, at this point, the BHO is just better. So I'm just going to go back to that shit. And that was about when we moved to Colorado. And then, that was kind of when like I had my first like proper dab, I would say.
Oh, tell us about that.
It was like a 3 or 4 foot roar bong, open titanium nail, center post titanium, and like some black ass looking oil that like didn't even look good. And like my home, shout out Jason, one of my good Colorado homies. We were like I lived 3 blocks away, and he's like, dude, you gotta come try this shit. Like, all right, whatever. And, he's got the torch. He's it's the thing like glowing hot, and like just throws a ball of this shit in there. I remember getting so fucking high, I couldn't drive home, and I lived like 3 blocks away. And I come like walking through the door, and my girlfriend, who's my wife now, is like, at the time, she's like, what did you do? I'm like, I don't know, I just smoked some shit. It's fucking good, But it was like, after that, immediately it was like, all right, this is like, I want more of that. Like, it was really intense, and it was like a lot, but I liked it.
You went back for more, that's for sure.
Yeah, I went back for more, and then it was kind of like, okay, cool. It was kind of like, I kind of like went through that evolving of the like smoking culture in Colorado, not really like out here when like dabbing came along, so.
And then, what happened after that? How long did you stay in Colorado?
We were in Western Colorado for like 2.5 years, and then we did a little stint in West Texas, actually. After I finished school down there, and like kind of tapped into the energy industry a little bit down there, and it's like kind of a free for all. And then when that was like really a big thing, and it was like a way to like, I always kind of wanted to do my own thing, did like 6 months at a corporate company down there, and then kind of got plucked out by, a company that was working for the bigger company, and kind of got drug into like more than I knew what I was doing at the time. It's just like, hey, like throw them in the wolves and figure it out. And we ended up, it was quickly kind of figured out like, hey, this isn't like the vibe for us, got married, wife got pregnant, and it was like, all right, we got a kid on the way. Like, we need to start like making some life changes, because this area, this vibe of like, driving fancy cars and like big money shit's like just not, it's not for me, you know. It's like we got to figure some shit out. So we ended up going back to Colorado, still kind of doing the energy industry thing. Ended up opening an office as a partner for the company I was working for in Texas. Then with my cousin, and then the energy industry quickly died. So we were there for like a year and a half, and that was kind of a fun little time too. And like got to smoke a lot of like good melt. There was like a pretty established medical scene in Denver at the time. There was a lot of good BHO, a lot of good herb, and yeah, definitely had some buddies that, you know, went to school with on the Western Slope that were in Denver at the time. So, you know, always able to like make those old connections of like, you know, who's got the good stuff and like what's going on and what's current. But we had a little baby and stuff. Like, you know, different little humans in the picture. So
definitely changes things with the little humans. So you after
yeah.
when what was your next move after you left Colorado?
Yeah, so we were there for a little while, and then we, you know, my wife's from out here in Bellingham. We met like, you know, my first year I moved out there. All her family's back out there, and she was pregnant again at the time. So we had, you know, baby number two come in. It was like, again, this really just like, we thought like being in a different location would be like better for it, but it was like, you know, got to kind of like figure something out life-wise that suits us a little bit better, because, you know, I'm a stubborn son of a bitch, and I don't like taking direction for other people, and I'm a bad employee. So it was like, you know, I gotta figure something out. I want to do my own thing. That's always kind of been my vibe. That's like what I grew up around. So it's always kind of been kind of like a figure it out kind of thing. So yeah, we're just like, fuck it. And we moved back to Bellingham, you know, to be close to family. And yeah, had, you know, another little boy. And yeah, it was kind of like, again, kind of restart back there. And yeah, I was like guiding at the time, doing the seasonal guide thing. Did a little stint working for like a security company, doing like cameras and perimeter security stuff. And then like from the guiding time, kind of opened up and started a little freeze-dried food business that kind of like blew up in our face. So for the last, you know, 5-6 years, we've kind of been doing that thing, and just are kind of wrapping that up now after COVID.
Talk a little bit about that, because that was like, I mean, that was a big successful business, and I think, you know, it was really cool how it came about very organically.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it came about guiding, and it was like being in the woods for weeks on end, and like not having a whole lot of solid options food wise to like either enjoy, and you're out there working pretty damn hard, and it's definitely like, you know, type 2 fun. Like you gotta learn how to enjoy the suck to like really enjoy what you're doing out there, or it's not going to be fun for you.
Type 2, I like that. What's your definition? Like, what's the definition of type 2 fun?
It's like you gotta enjoy the like shitty part of it, you know. Like it's like I'm a big bow hunter. I like climbing up a mountain in the dark, like which sucks and is like creepy and weird, but it's like there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm gonna go up there and like freeze my ass off and like hike around till my legs feel like they're gonna fall off, and like just to like have that end moment of being able to like bring that all back, put it in my freezer, you know, which is a process in itself, and like feed it to my kids and like give that to my family, you know. So there's like, I mean, there's all sorts of type 2 fun, but it's like it's something that you like, it's like a grind and a struggle through to like get to that little end like successful moment.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So
Big fan of type 2.
So you come about on this idea for a freeze dried food as you're doing these guided hunts, and then how quickly does that business start to take off?
Well, it was cool. So like I had made one season, I'd like made a bunch of food for myself, like with a dehydrator, and like made my own like breakfast and trail mix and stuff like that. So it's like, all right, if I want to like be on top of my game, I need to like eat pretty good out there. So if I want to like eat good, I'm going to take like matters into my own hands. So then I was, out there like eating trail mix and some stuff I had made with, a client at the time for the outfitter I was working for. And he's like, what are you doing after the season? I was like, I don't really know, man. Like, that's still up in the air. Like, I got to figure some shit out pretty quick, And he's like, why don't you like do this? And he's like munching on some shit. And it was like, what do you mean? He's like, why don't you do this? I was like, well, it's kind of like easy for you to say, man. Like, you're a pretty successful dude out here spending quite a bit of money to like have my ass drag you around through the woods in hopes to like better your chance at shooting an elk. Like, I'm like, like trying to like give me a little like shot. So like over the course of that, like so for that I kind of like talk like, well, like, this is kind of what you like need to do this, and like here's what I would look for, and like here's some good starting points, and had a bunch of conversations with other people in my life about that kind of stuff, and it was like, yeah, kind of once again threw myself to the wolves, and it was like, let's try and figure this out, and had some connections from the guiding world that people were like, all right, well, if you're gonna do this, we'll help you like get it out there, but like be ready, to like follow through and like do this shit. So it was like, all right, yeah, let's go, let's do it. And it was like spring of 2017, and it was like we were full up and going and had like our own like commercial kitchen space and a bunch of freeze dryers by like August.
You had 8 freeze dryers.
It's kind of wild. Yeah, at one point we had 8 large harvest rights, and we're just like, yeah, grinding out little bags of just add water to food with healthy ingredients and like good, like as sustainable as we could get sourcing, which is like kind of part of the reason it did as well as it did for a little while until it didn't, was like the people out there like doing that care about what they're eating. Like hunting's not all about just going out and like shooting some animal, it's like there's a much bigger picture to it than that. So like, having all those fine details that go along with that, like translate really well into like, I'm out here to like eat good and engage in this type 2 fun, to almost like better myself. Like, why would I go eat the equivalent of McDonald's while I'm out here doing it? So it's like, okay, we kind of like solved an issue that wasn't there for a long time because the only options were like mass produced, just kind of like junk food. And it kind of like blew up real fast, and we were all like completely direct to consumer, like all, self-manufactured, self-distributed, food business for, the last, 5 years. And, COVID hit, and that kind of really started taking a downturn. We did a lot of like bulk business with outfitters up in Canada It's kind of like how we kept our off season alive, being a direct to consumer brand, because we do like their whole summer of outfitting, you know, in the wintertime while, you know, the website wasn't as busy. So borders closed, seasons basically ended, you know, it was down here. You weren't even allowed in a lot of the like public lands down here for a little while. So it was like, you know, it was good while it was good. And then it quickly, you know, took a swan dive into like, not sure if this is going to be, you know, sustainable for all that much longer. So, you know, all that time, it's like, yeah, had freeze dryers. This is kind of like when, you know, hash and rosin are becoming like more of a, you know, popular thing, like 2017, 2018. Kind of started like messing around back in that. Like I always liked smoking good. Like I've always kind of like been, you know, chasing that like high quality. Again, like I like eating good, clean stuff that I have my hands involved in from start to finish, and it's kind of like, you know, really connects with like cannabis on that level too. Whether you're like growing something or doing extracts or whatever, it's like I like having my hands involved in that process and being a part of those like fine details. You know, I like having control of that. So.
Absolutely. So like after you wrap up the freeze dried food company, and I mean, to no fault of your own, your business is part of hundreds of thousands of other businesses that became, you know, basically destroyed by COVID. You know, you were dependent on those hunting, those outfitters, and those outfitters were dependent on rich people being able to travel, and you know, none of that happened. So that makes that, you know, that was unfortunate. But then you start pivoting.
Yeah.
Who was it that showed you flower rosin? Like when you first saw flower rosin, was it on the YouTube with Soil Grown, or was it in person, you know, with somebody else?
Yeah, no, there was flower rosin. Yeah, it was like like YouTube. I remember watching that Soil Grown video, and I remember watching like, you know, Matt Rise's YouTube videos back in the day. And again, it's like trippy to be on here, but like watching Bubble Man's videos back in the day. So yeah, there was like, you know, that was when there was a lot of more info readily available. That's for sure. And like I had been back here, and like I would get, you know, that's when like the hair straightener game was big. So it's like I would get milk from homies and like press my own little, you know, dabs out and shit, like when that was starting to become a thing. And then yeah, got into the flower rosin thing for just like a little bit, and quickly realized like, no, this isn't it. Like, you know, I know what like, yeah, this is like not going to be the thing that takes it to like the next level or whatever. So then, yeah, we kind of like, I was when the food business was really like running and gunning and going, and, you know, had tried to like, there was enough info out there. I'd like tried to make, you know, some batches on my own, like freeze dried, you know, bubble at this point, like, you know, early, you know, late 2017, early 2018 or whatever. And didn't really have like, definitely zorged a couple batches in the freeze dryer, you know, like it's not like, you know, drying food. Like you can dry the food at the standard setting, which is like 120 degrees on the shelf temp. So like, yeah, put a batch of like trim in there that I like, you know, had to go like buy from a homie to like start like trying to fuck around with this or whatever. And like, yeah, ruined a handful of batches. But then we kind of it was like that the food business was really busy. We needed to find a way to like not be running a bunch of little freeze drying machines. And it was really like who else is doing this besides Harvest Right? Like they're really the only ones like making a small home scale model. So we kind of like started digging around and found a company in New York, and they built a 50 kilogram wet capacity freeze dryer for us that was like 10 feet tall, 10 feet deep, and like 8 feet wide. Had 10 like 5x5 shelves on it, and a 3-inch, poly bulletproof, bulletproof acrylic glass door on the damn thing, because it would get down to such a high amount of vacuum pressure, or low amount of vacuum pressure. But so that thing was super fun. It ended up breaking on us like 6 months down the road, which also like threw a wrench into the food business plan. But it's always kind of been like, all right, shit happens. How are you gonna deal with it? But we had this big freeze dryer, and I was like, all right, I need to like put the bird out. I got all these like little harvest rights I need to like get rid of. So it's kind of like send the word out. I got a bunch of harvest rights available, and like, all the hash guys around town start like hitting me. I'm like, yeah, I'll buy them things. It's like, sweet. Oh, you're like into this shit too. Oh, that's super cool. So like met some of my like now really good buddies, getting rid of these freeze dryers, and like, shout out one of my good buddies who's, still around in this area. He might be watching. I don't know if he is or not, but, gave me some really like key tips that helped me like refine like the basics of that process to the point where I could then like, all right, now I can like start figuring out how to like do this, So it's like a couple key little things that really, really helped change it really fast. So
that's
and
awesome.
then ever since then, it's kind of been like, processing for other people here around town, and some homies kind of more like seasonally, but we're not really seasonal. There's a lot of indoor stuff around here. So, it's kind of just been like whatever you can get your hands on, and,
You recently just purchased the license.
Yeah, a lot of learning experience in the last 3 or 4 years for sure,
Yeah.
What's that?
I said that you recently just purchased the license. Why? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we did. So, it's been a work in progress. But again, it was kind of like, do we want to like venture down this path of like the licensed cannabis route, which I don't on all aspects fully agree with. I think a lot of us like in this circle kind of feel the same way. Like, great, it's it's legal here, it's cool, but the way that it's been like set up and a lot of the intentions behind it have really kind of like put a damper on how it's developed and what the current scene looks like. And it's really kind of like off-putting, when you look at it in certain perspectives. But at the same time, it's like, if people don't start like trying to make the transition to like the licensed space that have like solid intentions behind it, and like want to do it to put out good products and good clean products for people, like, then it's never gonna fucking change, and we're just gonna have like more corporate fuckery and people that don't even smoke running massive businesses in this space, and it doesn't help it progress anywhere. So it's like, if no one's there fighting for the small guys, like the small guy is just gonna get stomped out every fucking time. So it's like, what? Had an opportunity to like jump on a license, and just dealing with that process in itself has been like a big learning experience and frustration and pain in the ass. But it's like, again, all right, yeah, it's stressful and it sucks. But how are you going to deal with it? And we're kind of like just getting through that end of it. And it's like, okay, well, all right, yeah, there is a small group of us up here in Washington that like have a like mindset about this stuff and like want to do it right with like good intentions and put out a good, clean product. You know, that's different from people just washing material just because they have a bunch of material they can't get rid of, or because it's like the new cool thing, or whatever, you know. But it is cool because there is like a small group and it's growing and it's like gaining more traction, you know, here, where like, oh, like, yeah, it's like the little guys are starting to matter again almost, you know. So it's like if more people don't start joining that push, then it's never going to change, and it'll just be, you know, the same disappointing stuff that, you know, we've been dealing with and that we all bitch about, you know, all bitch about legalization over, you know. 'Cause it's like, no, it's not perfect, but, you know, someone's got to, you know, we got to get in there and like try and make it a little bit different, you know, at least by like occupying the space ourselves with people who give a shit.
For sure. How's your path to market? Like, are you able to see and like confidently produce a product and then be able to get that to store shelves? Because I know in Canada, a lot of small producers have that issue where they can produce a product that they're proud of, but they have no ability to really get that to, or uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty around getting that onto the store shelves.
Yeah, we're kind of, you know, we've kind of been like dipping our toes into that, working out of, you know, friend space for the last little bit. But yeah, how Washington is set up, you can't, there's no like direct consumer aspect. There's no like direct to medical patient aspect. They kind of got rid of all that stuff when it did go recreational up here, which is really another disappointing, you know, aspect of it, to see the whole like medical culture and like the good parts of the medical industry just get kind of like wiped off, you know, when it went rec. So there's there's a very certain way you have to do it. It's all like, you know, tracked and traced by the state. But yeah, we're allowed to, you know, sell to licensed retail stores, and then, you know, they mark up the ever living hell out of it to the consumer because of the way the whole tax structure is set up. So, you know, it's rough and it's painful, and it can be a, you know, tough pill to swallow. And it's not all sunshine and roses like people think it is, because they've made it really hard, man. Honestly, they've made it tough. So, you know, shout out to everybody doing it, because it's not easy.
It is not easy. The regulatory rigmarole is, you know, it can dishearten the most motivated person. I've seen it happen. I want to switch gears.
You know.
Yeah, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your lab and what you're set up.
Yeah. Keep this up real quick. You said about the lab? Yeah, so we've got a pretty cool setup. We're in a big old farm out here in the county. So we've got a cool cold room. We're running an Osprey, and that's I don't know what specifics you want to like get into, but that's kind of like our general setup is we are running the Osprey. It's really just two of us on the production end of things. So that thing's kind of like our third man, really.
What made you choose an Osprey?
It was, I think the only other option at the time we got it was like that or the Icon from the Ice Extract guys. And I just kind of liked the design of the Osprey better, and it was kind of like one of those big decisions we kind of like just jumped the gun on right off the bat, and really glad we did. Allows us to like keep it really streamlined. It's basically just the two of us, and then we've got another guy that kind of handles all the sales end of things. So, you know, we can keep it pretty streamlined. And that thing, yeah, it does a lot of like, saves us a lot of time and allows us to focus on other little important pieces. So
what brand of bags do you use?
we've been using the Resin Evolution ones just because they're all mesh, and you can get big ones. I like. But I've also got a small set of the ice extract ones that I run at my house when I'm doing small batches or doing stuff out of my own little medical garden. I'll run those ones because they are really nice,
For sure. What
yeah, we've been running the Resin Evolution ones in the lab here. They're nice, and they're less painful to replace. You can toss them around a little bit more and not have to worry about a $2,000 set of bags getting fucked up. So I really like running them in I run the bigger bags in a smaller bin. Just with our setup, it's been a lot easier, and it prevents a lot of the stretch. But yeah, I'd like to get a set of the big fancy nice mesh bags like the Micron extract ones or whatever. But we're in startup mode, so we are stringing it together, baby. Someday.
do you double up on any bags?
I will I don't really double up on them, but I'll run a 220 and a 190.
Interesting. You'll run a double 220?
No, I don't run the double 220. I'll just always run the 190 in there too. It's like kind of comes to the sets. It's like it drains almost just as fast as the 220. It's a little bit finer of a micron, so it's just a little bit extra layer of filtering on that upper end of the spectrum. So I'll run the 220 and then the 190, and then kind of depending on what we're doing or what we're washing or what the end product goal is, will kind of determine what we throw in from there. So if we know if it's a new strain, I'm putting all the bags in so I can see where everything is falling, where like the quality is. And then, a lot of times we'll just kind of we've got a big log of everything that we've processed, and it's getting quite long. So we can kind of look back and see, what's doing what where. And if the end goal is put it all into rosin, we'll pull a bag or two out of that, full 8-bag set or whatever, and run the 220 and the 190 and a 160. And then, drop that to either a 90 or a 70, depending on, or maybe we'll pull a 9 out of the first wash and then run more. Did it cut out there for a sec?
Yeah, you cut out. You've been cutting out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on the shop. It's been stormy, so we're actually lucky. A bunch of the homies south of us here have been out of power for 3 days now. So
we're lucky. We're lucky to be able to do that.
So yeah, then we'll kind of adjust the bags based on what we want the end result to be. If you want to pull a super premium rosin, maybe we'll pull a 90 bag out of that first wash, and then maybe put a 120 in too, and then remove those two and just pull more of a full spectrum rosin product out from a 73 to a 159. So kind of running what the situation calls for, I guess.
For sure. So are you personal preference preferring melt or rosin? Just you?
Man, I mean, I wish a lot more things made melt. Proper melt, Because I love good melt. I usually like keep a little bit around, like pull out on special occasions and whatnot. But I mean, yeah, mostly like the day to day, it's smoking rosin. It's easy, it's convenient. You don't have to like be as careful with it, or I got little kids, so like a lot of times it's like I gotta sneak out, rip a dab, and bounce. I don't have time to like flat that shit out and like cut it into my little like a little pie shape for my little dabs for the day. So, but I love good melt. Like I said, it seems like it's even getting like harder and harder to find stuff that will like produce a real proper melt. That like checks all the boxes.
What would you say is some stuff that checks all the boxes for you?
I mean, shit, I haven't like kept anything around that's made like super, super good melt from the last like few little hunts that I've done. I'm trying to think of stuff that I've smoked recently that was like super stellar. Kaya's stuff, the Roots guys stuff's always stellar. Got a couple buddies in town who are, traditional side of things, whose stuff's pretty damn good. But yeah, it's just kind of like when it comes around, it's around. It seems like it's hard to find, man. Unless you're like, yeah, got a good melt strain and doing it yourself. It seems like it's like, it's hard to package. It's hard to transport and keep like in a fresh state that like doesn't, start degrading by the time it gets to whoever's smoking on it. So it's just like, there's a lot more to it, a lot more to it, which makes it a little more difficult.
So let me ask, do you think, as somebody who's washing a lot of resin and looking at a lot of plants, do you think that the plant is maxed out at a yield around 8 to 10%? Or do you feel with all these people breeding these cultivars that, the plant still has a lot of room to produce more resin?
I don't know. That's, it's like, I mean, at that level of like breeding for this stuff is all like, even rosin itself is so like relatively new, it's like it hasn't even really been around for like 10 years yet. So it's like, I don't think we've seen like where that's going to cap out yet. I don't know enough to really like talk to that side of it, but just from like a way things typically like go and progress, like, I mean, I'm sure we'll see it get higher than where it is right now. Like just by fact that it's still kind of like, breeding for hash is like still kind of in its infancy, It's like there's a lot of crazy technology coming out that's like, probably like it's going to change stuff every couple of years. Like we're in that like fast progressing time frame right now. So I don't know what it'll end up being, but it'll probably be, it's like you can only pack so much on there. I don't know what it'll like cap out at, but I think it'll be higher than what we see right now. Shit, I'm still trying to find that 8-10%er. Like, if you got one, let me know.
Yeah, I mean those yields. I mean, what are your thoughts on those? Do you mind just unplugging the speakers? I think every time I talk, I'm getting like a little bit of a reverb. Are you still able to hear me if you do?
Probably not.
Okay, never mind. Don't worry about it. The hash yields. Are you is that something you've put a lot of thought into, or any thought into at all, as far as like how we get to a more industry standardization where hash makers can communicate between one another more accurately around these numbers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I don't really like, it's tough. Yeah. There's so much around like what goes into a, yield that like, it's tough to just like take someone's word without like actually like looking at it and getting your hands on it, or like doing a decent sized test batch of like 1,000 grams or something, So yeah, I don't know. It's like, yeah, the yield thing is really, really interesting. Like, yeah, you've got the genetic side of it that plays a part. You got the cultivation side that plays a really, really huge part. But like us being just a processor, it's like how do we maximize things for our own benefit? It's like I don't want to just like, so we spend a lot of time like with the farms that we work with here, like on like how to prep that fresh frozen, or like, how to handle things a little bit differently without like totally messing up your flow of normal, operating. Like how do we help control that process? Because yeah, I think like when you are talking yields, a big part of that, especially with like fresh frozen material, is how it's handled and how it's prepped and how it's cared for before it ever hits the water.
So what are the biggest mistakes that you're seeing with these farms that you're working with?
What are the what?
Biggest mistakes that you're seeing?
A lot of it's just like the day-to-day stuff that if they're not, if hash isn't in their end focus, they're not really like thinking about it. What it's like simple stuff, just like walking down tight rows and brushing up against branches, or grabbing stuff to look at it, or just being extra rough while you're defoliating or whatever, or not paying attention like you would if like preserving those heads was your sole focus.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, it's just a lot of like, okay, why is it important that this stays really frozen the entire time? From you to me until it's like time to wash it. It's just like sometimes you run into like bad batches of material that, yeah, maybe it still turns out good, but like you lost some yields with the way that it was handled or whatever. So just trying to like do what we can. And luckily, like the people we're working with are like really close friends of ours. Like one of the main farms we're working with, like some of the guys, like the first people I met when I moved out to Bellingham here, like I've known them for like 20 years. So, it's like they allow us to do a lot more than like, maybe they let someone else, like as far as us coming in there and like looking at plants, touching stuff, doing like little bits of testing and like kind of like picking out what we want. We get a lot of like freedom with a couple people that we work with to like say, hey, we want kind of like that little batch of plants, rather than them saying like, here's our like leftovers, we took all the good stuff. Like, here's what we got, so that's where we're trying to like make our ourselves stand out, is like, really being selective about who our product comes from and how it's handled. So as much as we can, being just a processor. So
for sure. So like overall, the North American cannabis market's in a tough spot right now. Do you feel like we've hit rock bottom, or do you feel like we've still got some rough years ahead of us before things get better?
I mean, man, it's like it's tough to look at it on like a nationwide scale while we're like, at least on the licensed end of things, just limited to doing stuff here in our own little state. So it's like, yeah, it's definitely been down here though. It's kind of like sad to see, see people that have been around for a while closing doors. Just people like struggling in general. So, I hope it's kind of making its turn. We're back. A lot of it, obviously like the last couple of years have had a pretty big impact on that. It's like the market here in Washington anyways was like really, really good during COVID, when everyone was like at home and like getting, had a little more free time and whatever to like, do their own thing. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of been, we've kind of been seeing the impact of that now, like a year later. You know, people not spending as much money on stuff they used to, or spending it in a different way now that they can go back and do stuff that they couldn't for the last few years. You know, so be interesting to see. But then again, it's like, you know, there are people that are, you know, there's ways to do it and not struggle. It's like, you know, I think, you know, the high quality space always kind of seems to hang on a little bit stronger than, you know, people pushing out a lower quality product. So it's our little niche, and yeah, like I said, try and ride it out until it does get better. So until something either changes in the market or like regulation wise, really, that's what we need. So
absolutely, man. Well, as we like start to wrap things up, what are 5 of the most impressive cultivars that you're working with local farmers, like that's come across your wash bin?
Man, I think you know what I'm going to say, but the Royal Tree Gardens ice cream cake
Yeah.
on that side of things is like a really special one. Does good for flour and for hash. And it's one they hunted through like when that originally came out, and it's super different. It's almost got like a lemon limey Sprite kind of vibe to it, super gassy, and it's like a little bit different than most of the ice cream cakes that I've had my hands on. So there's that one, and then yeah, man, our big focus is like right now trying to find stuff that we can plug into these gardens that are like unique and do well for us specifically, and not having to like, you know, find washers in someone's, you know, library of flower genetics. It's like, how do we, you know, let's find stuff that works well for us and then try and get it plugged in there. So
Do you have any
kind of our play.
Do you have any specific breeders that you like to work with?
Man, I mean, right now hunting through quite a bit of the Little Lake Valley stuff. Been running some of the Bloom stuff lately. Got some Masonic stuff we're kind of trying to sort through right now, Buddy and I. Then yeah, man, I'm excited. There's a handful of breeders here local. A couple buddies have like kind of started to take their genetic side of things and try and make a play with it. So there's a couple homies here locally that like have some exciting looking gear that, you know, it's kind of starting to get out there. But yeah, man, it's like there's so much cool stuff out there. It's like you never know what you could really like find a winner out of, you know. So I try to like keep a really open mind about like what you can find from where, you know. So.
Absolutely, man. Anything specifically that you're excited for this year, either personally or professionally, with North Sound or yourself, that you've got on your mind or working towards?
Man, I feel like we've got like a crazy storm of stuff coming up. You know, we're getting back into like our own space here, and like really getting to like kind of see how the market is, you know. And then I'll see you in a couple weeks up in Canada. Actually, like 2 weeks up in Canada. So that's gonna be super fun. I'm really excited to like meet some of the guys up there and taste a bunch of Canadian hash. And like I said, kind of get back up to that like area that started it all, that like Squamish Whistler area. So it's a super special area. I'm excited to get back up to. And then like the week after that, I'll see you again in California for Legends.
Yes, you will.
And yeah, super excited to be able to attend that as a guest, you know, and that'll be a blast. And then got the holidays, doing some family stuff, and then New York, baby.
Nothing to the heads. Let's go. North Sound. That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
I feel like I got a lot of next couple months. So
for sure.
Yeah, I'm really
We're
looking forward.
excited, man.
I've never been to New York.
Yeah, definitely gonna love to have you back on the show. And yeah, definitely excited to see you soon up here in Canada and then again in LA.
Dude, I'm super excited.
Awesome.
So.
Right on, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to tune in and make sure you check out Spencer at what's the IG for North Sound?
Right now it's North Sound 2.0 with a underscore in between. Or like
North Sound 2.0.
Our original page, which was North Sound Solventless, got the axe from either something.
It happens. All right.
So I had to make a new page. But yeah, dude, thank you so much for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe.